Welcome to the CX Files. I'm Peter Ryan. Now, the ability to deliver the best CX possible has long been predicated by engaged, happy agents working in a positive environment. But the reality is, until now, much of these discussions have been rhetorical and really of little substance. But the good news is this appears to be changing, with a number of operators aiming to reconfigure what the contact center will look like from an agent perspective. One of those is Intersect-HP, a burgeoning BPO that services a global set of clients from its base in South Africa. And today, the CX File speaks to its founders, George Todd and Darren Arnold, each of whom has a strong legacy in customer management business, about why this new model is taking flight. Well, today the CX Files is pleased to welcome two longtime friends in the form of Darren Arnold and George Todd from Intersect-HP. Gentlemen, great to have you on the podcast today.
Great to be here, Peter.
Yeah,
Thanks
definitely.
a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And you guys are familiar faces, in this case, familiar voices to, I think, many people in the customer experience management business. And you've recently taken a bit of an interesting turn in your careers and what you're up to. So, Darren, I'm going to start with you. Can you talk to us a little bit about Intersect-HP and what it's all about?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. So you're right. George and I have both been in the space of contact centers for, I say 25 years. My wife says a quarter of a century, which makes it sound an awful lot longer. And in that time, we've operated in captive environments and outsourced environments. And we're fortunate enough to be looking after a business that had 8,000 seats across multiple geographies. And we came to a view that there were lots of opportunities to do things differently. And so Intersect-HP, the HP stands for human potential. It's all about taking contact centers into a different place through unleashing that human potential and using technology that to some degree has been designed to replace humans to actually really truly enable that human potential.
Great. Thanks, Darren. That's really great to hear. And congratulations on the new initiative. It sounds very exciting. And I think conceptually, this is something we've been hearing a lot about. So it's great to get a little bit of feedback from both of you today about how this is looking to play out from a CX perspective. And George, I'm going to throw the microphone over to you. Love to get your thoughts on why the contact center environment, whether it's outsourced or whether it's captive, why did these operations have to change their physical environments in order to be relevant moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, Peter. We over the years, we spent a lot of time designing, very cool offices where we housed our operations. But the cool spaces were always the spaces outside of the main operational floor, because the operational floor was constrained by a number of different things. Contact centers in general require, and in most cases, there is a lot of sound suppression is built into the environment in order to ensure that there isn't too much background noise going through to a customer and affecting the quality of that. But also there's an element there where, in order to ensure that the people are where they're supposed to be, doing what they're supposed to be doing, when they're supposed to be doing it, is that the environments have traditionally been quite, let's call it regimented, quite controlling in the nature of their design. So we would build some really cool places to work, but the actual contact center space, the operational floor, really hadn't changed that much. There might be some changes, but hadn't changed that much. Whereas in many other businesses, there have been an awful lot of change. Started probably in places in Silicon Valley where it became trendy now to, you want to attract the best people and you want them to feel inspired by the environments that they work in. And it's that's a thing that I think contact center businesses have struggled with. But a lot of that has been down to A, number one, the technology that's being used, and B, also the need to provide a level of control over your people. The reason why that needs to change is because if you're going to have a hybrid world where work from home is an important component in any business, well, work from home doesn't have any of those things. So it relies on, for example, technology to address some of that noise suppression side of things. And the control aspect, well, actually, you can't control your people. And when you do try to do it, and we've seen we've all seen the articles about some of the companies in the industry looking to use video as a way of basically, for want of a better term, spying on the people so they can make sure that, well, I'm watching you. But fundamentally, people don't want to work for companies who are going to treat them that way. So the environments within the contact centres are going to have the same sort of freedoms as the environment someone would have if they're working from home. Otherwise, that hybrid idea, isn't going to work in our industry, and then people won't want to work in the industry because they won't get any of the benefits that other people do. So that change is, it's a trickle at the moment, and we hope to pioneer a lot of the work in this. But it's going to have to become a flood sooner rather than later, or there's going to be major impact on the industry in the years ahead.
But this is really interesting because I've heard, even before the pandemic, I heard about these reconfigurations of what the contact center would need to look like going forward. And, if we think pre-pandemic, there was a lot of discussion about co-working spaces. That became a very popular business model. I'm curious from what you guys have been finding based on the research you've been doing. And George, I'm going to stick with you on this for a second. What, in your view, does the ideal contact center of the future need to look like? If I'm an agent looking to start a career in CX, whether it's in South Africa or anywhere else in the world, onshore or offshore, what am I going to be expecting in terms of the optimal work environment?
The interesting thing, Peter, is that environment is actually going to be more about the culture and more about the operating model than it is going to be about the physical environment. It's going to be about when I come to work, I'm enabled, I'm trusted, I'm supported, I'm encouraged, I'm allowed to drive my own career and my own output. I'm given the type of freedoms that in many other businesses, that's almost taken for granted, but that I will be, that when I come to work in the contact center of the future, I'm in a position where I am able to control rather than be controlled, where I am able to understand what it is that's expected of me and then make decisions on how to best do that and be motivated and inspired to want to do that. And where the physical environment comes in is that what it needs to do is to inspire in order to enable that change in the culture and change in the operating model. It needs to make people want to come to that place to engage with their colleagues, because that social component, the component of the ability to interact with others and to bounce off of others and to feel the energy that comes from that, that's a hugely important part of working in it. And many people are desperate to go back to work in an office because they find a complete lack of that in what they do. And going forward, what our research tells us, it's interesting what we see with the people that we have working, is that they want to engage socially, they want to have that connection, but they want to be inspired. And so I think that's probably the most important component of the physical environment, is it's got to enable them and it's got to inspire them. And then the most important component on top of that is the technology and the operating model has got to do the same thing. And it's that triumvirate together that's really going to define the contact center of the future.
But then that raises a really good point. And Darren, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. One of the things I have picked up on, or at least I was picking up on prior to the lockdown when we were able to do site visits and travel, was that despite all the criticisms that you heard contact centers getting in terms of sterile, uninteresting, unimaginative business environments, a lot of them were doing it quite well. So from your perspective, Darren, what do you think contact centers pre-pandemic can keep in this new way of delivering CX, and what needs to be abandoned?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's interesting that lots of the conversations at the moment are revert to the pre-pandemic, and I think that's really useful, because I think we also need to understand what we've done in inverted commas to keep the lights on, certainly in the early stages of the pandemic, and the extent to which we've moved on from that, bearing in mind that we've been in this situation for 18 months. But to go to your question, pre-pandemic, I think certainly the criticism that you describe in many cases historically has been well warranted. Contact centres are very often seen as unnecessary cost base. And lots of organizations and leaders in the contact space have tried to move the perception from cost into a profit center or a value center with greater or lesser degrees of success. Nonetheless, in the main, a big consideration for many contact centers has been about cost. It's been about the physical environment, leveraging or improving the utilization of space in a predetermined office size. So fundamentally, that comes down to cost. I think some of the more enlightened organizations have made great strides in terms of the design of those centers. Some of those at a superficial level appear to be veneer, but things like very positive social breakout areas so that agents can regulate between their differing shifts and before and after break times and those kind of things. I don't think those things should be lost, and that social interaction is really important. There's been great investment in training. I would say, alas, that there's significant work to be done as we move into a hybrid work from home, work from office environment. Merely transferring training materials onto a PowerPoint and presenting over a Zoom or a Teams meeting isn't going to cut the mustard going forward. So there's some good things in terms of physical environments and in training environments, but as a more holistic, there's more work to be done.
Yeah, go ahead, please, George.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I think just another point I make is I think those organisations that you talk about, they had recognised the need for them to engage their people. That if they were going to compete and if they were going to differentiate themselves from others, it was going to be about their people and how the people differentiated them. And what they were looking for was whatever way could they get it to get their people more engaged. And I think what you saw were different businesses finding different ways. The gamification thing has been a huge sort of a movement and wanting people to be more engaged and to use that type of thing to make them feel that way. And so I really do think it's been about an understanding of, prior to pandemic, we still understood that what we needed was if you wanted to differentiate, you needed to have good people and you needed those people to want to be there and to want to give their best. And I think that can't be thrown away. That's that is the contact center of the future.
But then, George, that raises an interesting point. If we're talking about what contact centers need to look like and what needs to be adapted, what are the risks for organizations, whether it's outsourcers or captives, that don't evolve in this direction? What are they putting on the table that might end up making them fall behind from a CX perspective?
Well, I mean, I think that they're putting their it's a difficult one because it depends on the client. If we're talking outsourcers, it depends on the client. The client is going to drive what outcomes they're looking for. But my take on that, and when we set up Intersect-HP, our view on this was that we didn't believe we were setting up a business that was going to be for everyone, because what we were looking for were the clients who did want to differentiate on the basis of the quality of that CX, and therefore were willing to stretch the envelope a little bit. For those organizations that remain, in the outsourced world, trying to find ever cheaper offshore destinations to go to, and I know you'll know this, you guys end up spending, going to more and more different destinations around the world as big globals look for somewhere else where they can eke out, another 5 cents off the dollar on cost. And you can keep doing that up to a point, but fundamentally, we would look at that and say, what then ends up happening is the reputational damage that comes from things like, okay, now we're going to use video to watch you whilst you're at home. And, if their model doesn't evolve, what's going to happen is that their press, for want of a better term, is going to get worse and worse. And you saw with the Apple thing, where Apple immediately came out and said, we don't have any, we know nothing about this. This has got nothing to do with us. We don't video our people, et cetera, et cetera. And they immediately distanced themselves from their partner. And that, I think, is where the real risk is that, if you're not able to be willing to basically, lift the rug on how you run your contact centers and how you treat your people, then I think what will happen is clients will eventually just say, well, we can't do business with anyone unless, we want someone to be able to bring in a video camera at any point in time on any day of the week and come in and see it without anyone knowing and be happy with what that footage is going to show. So I think that's the big risk, is the risk that in the end, that move towards, let's call it, more enlightened clients is going to mean that the catchment for the type of business they're trying to do is just going to get smaller.
Yeah, risk is an omnipresent word in CX, and it takes on so many different components or different angles. And Darren, one of the questions I've got for you is related to data security, information security, which we know is very, very much top of line on the minds of different individuals who are contracting with outsourcers or that might be actually performing the work themselves. Using this new approach, using this new environment that might be more engaging and might be more holistic from the standpoint of the agent experience, how can you ensure that you're going to be able to be 100% compliant, that you're going to be able to achieve maximum data protection in this type of an operating atmosphere?
Yeah, it's certainly front of mind, Peter, for most organizations and certainly for ourselves. And I think one of the benefits of our approach, which is effectively work from anywhere. So it's not work from office, it's not work from home, it's work from anywhere, is that the protocols are baked in across the operating model and across all of our systems. So we're not deploying point solutions to address a specific working environment. We have the protocols that underpin everything. And it kind of, at the most simplistic level, it starts at the start, and it is around people understanding that the majority of data security breaches aren't caused by malice. They're caused by lack of understanding, lack of knowledge, lack of awareness of the extent to which that they are putting data at risk. So that initial upfront policy creation and training and socialization with people of what their expectations of them are is really important. All the way through, the use of VPNs if it's offsite, the firewalls, antivirus, all of those good things. The beauty of a work from anywhere environment is that you can deploy the capacity where you need it, subject to the specifics of that particular work package. So where there are environmental concerns, which have taken organizations down the road of putting videos in people's homes, those types of PCI type activity might be better suited to an office environment. Where there are less risks associated, then that lends itself better to a work from anywhere type environment. So having an operating model that scales across different working environments so that you can work from anywhere means that you can deploy the right type of work in the right kind of environment.
Really, really interesting. So, George, I'm going to finish off with you here in terms of our final question. And I would love it if you could talk to me a little bit about agent engagement in the roles. Now, the way I'm going with this is I remember seeing a fantastic presentation 3 or 4 years ago at a contact center conference in Colombia. And there was a really forward-looking executive that was talking a little bit about how they had reconfigured, they'd remodeled the contact centers, and they'd incorporated all sorts of different activities areas, different games, different things that people could be doing. And that there was much more of a self-governing approach in terms of how the agents were able to manage their own time. And I remember asking a question to this presenter, and that was more or less along the lines of, at what point do these go from being a motivation and they become a distraction in the contact center environment? And I'll pose the same question because I think what we're talking about now is a lot more real world than it was 3-4 years ago. And there's certainly, obviously, Intersect-HP as well as a number of other providers that are looking to try and bring this model forward. What would your response be to a client that had that concern about the extent to which agents would be fully engaged as opposed to distracted with perhaps some of the other peripheral activities going on in the center?
Yeah, If I was a client, that's exactly what I would be asking. I would want to understand that. And in effect, what we when we started designing our operating model, and we went out and tried to find the elements that we wanted to bring together into our solution, which got the balance between engagement and not distracting. We pretty quickly came to a realization that actually there wasn't anything out there at this moment in time that really, the end-to-end on a full agent experience, there wasn't anything that covered it. Because there's different pockets. There are really exceptional learning management systems. There's gamification. There's coaching platforms. There's so many tools out there, and we were really impressed by a lot of what we saw by those tools. But one of the challenges you've got is, how do you get the balance? How do you get the balance for that agent that they actually understand how do all those things fit together into what is it my job is, what's expected of me, what is it, what are the standards I need to hit? When I hit them, what happens? Do I get rewarded? Do I get recognized? If I keep doing that, does something else happen? Do I get promoted? Do I get, those things didn't all unify together. And eventually we made the decision that we were going to design our own platform to do that, because that balance, that understanding, says the most important thing is that what these things should do is enable the agent to deliver a better experience to the customer. If it's not doing that, then it's fluff. Then it's superficial. If you're doing it just to if it's distracting, then that's because basically what you're not doing is giving that agent the level of control of their own self that they are allowed to understand what's expected of them. They can pull towards them coaching and learning and development. They can see what impact that has on performance. That you can use the same AI tools that are used in order to replace them to monitor how effective all of this is and give them that guidance to say, hey, we think you should access this. They can see that on their own performance dashboard. They're not waiting for someone to come and have a performance chat with them. They are seeing it on a day-to-day basis. And then they're saying, well, what effect does this have on not just my performance, but my recognition and my reward? How much am I getting paid on the back of this? And when you knit all of that together, the fundamental aim of all of that is an engaged agent who knows what's expected, who knows what they need to do to get better. And what that then does is delivers an improving experience for the end customer and obviously for the client. So the distraction piece, I think it's a major issue. And I think some businesses will make the mistake of going out and pulling lots of different tools in. The problem's going to be is that is a risk. That what they'll do is end up, with such a licorice all sorts for those from the UK who understand a licorice all sorts of all these different things, but they can't all be combined to a really nice flavor. What you need is a real understanding of what's the end goal of all of it, and that everything should be designed together in order to produce that end goal.
Great stuff. Well, on that note, we will finish the discussion today. But gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for your time. And the best of luck with the new enterprise. It sounds like a tremendous concept that is very, not just contemporary, but I think very apropos for the times that we're moving into. We all hope we're going into a post-COVID, a post-vaccine period, or it might be ongoing vaccines, you never know. But the reality is there is light at the end of the tunnel. And in terms of what Intersect-HP is bringing to the table, it sounds like it's very solid and it's very pertinent for clients in all parts of the world. So again, best of luck, and we look forward to having you both on the CX Files very soon.
Look forward to it too. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you very
Thanks
much,
a lot,
Peter.
guys.
Thanks for downloading the CX Files podcast. If you have a moment, please give us a star rating or review on your favorite podcast provider, because this really helps other people to find the podcast. If you have any suggestions for future guests, or ideas, people or topics, then please just find myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan on LinkedIn and send a suggestion.